Is your practice tired of wrestling with insurance denials, deciphering EOBs, and watching your revenue slip through the cracks? You are not alone. Welcome to The Claim Game, the podcast designed to cut through the confusion and provide you with the best practices for revenue cycle management success. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and we've been with people just like you in the trenches. Each week, we'll break down complex billing processes, share real-world solutions from practices like yours, and ask questions of the game makers and changers of healthcare so you can take control of your revenue. Let's turn those claim denials into deposits and help you return to focusing on patient care. It's time to win the claim game.
Remind me what year this was when you had started the practice, you're growing, you're hiring people out of grad school. What's the time scale that we're looking at here?
2012. So I've been in private practice since like 2009 and was full and seeing, 30 plus clients a week and wanted to begin to teach and train. I have high bandwidth and I'm driven.
Clearly.
So, yeah. and I love my clinical work, right? So I just dove in but I was getting tired. I wanted to be able to provide good referrals. I wanted to teach and train. I'm an eating disorder specialist and ended up doing some DBT intensives to work with, population that had a lot of behavioral stuff. So I wanted to also help clinicians going into private practice to feel confident and at least have basic competency in working with those challenging populations, because a lot of people just didn't want to work with them and they needed help. And, and I had a really crappy supervision situation and I was like, I could do better than this. And my partner felt the same way. So we started with 3 clinicians part-time, and then over 10 years grew into what we grew into. But it was, we kept reinvesting and providing more and more teaching. We had intensive onboarding training. Everyone was assigned a mentor who was in addition to their clinical supervision. And we, in the end, ended up with 18 months of curriculum we had developed. All of that, right, that they got once a month, and their mentor helped them safer situation to be able to talk, especially about your own transference and what's going on in the room with someone who's not hiring and firing you and doesn't have, it's less.
That's a great point.
Threatening. Yeah. And, a lot of what I started seeing, like as clinicians were coming through and we were teaching and training, I started seeing patterns, right? And seeing, okay, by around 3 months, this is what's happening, and around 6 months and around a year. So I started taking all of that and kind of developed at the time what we called, professional development 1, 2, and 3 that we would go in and deliver in the first year to help people get oriented to where they were in the process, how they were developing and growing as a clinician, where their strengths were, their challenges, and people are hungry for that kind of feedback. It's a very lonely field. You're alone in the room with clients, and your supervisor could be really good, could be not, all of that. And so it gave people things over time with the metrics that we developed. You could kind of see the arc of onboarding in the first 3 months and what a normal kind of bell curve would look like. And it allowed me to look at patterns in that data and to say, okay, if you're an outlier, why? What behavior are you doing? And let's go in and teach and train, because everybody wanted to get hours. They wanted to be paid, right?
Yeah.
So if you're off the curve somehow, let's figure out what's going on in the room. Is it something we can do something about? And we invested really heavily in our people, in our teaching and training. We had CEU trainings throughout the year, and we brought in top people in the field in different areas of specialization, and they would come in and offer just to our employees intimate settings where they could get CEUs, but also really dig in and learn about all different types of modalities from experts. It was very invested. It was the kind of clinician's dream.
Oh, wow.
And so, when I was looking through the questions you sent, I was like, this question of could you do it again today? And I'm like, yeah, there's this environment in cash pay, right? There's this environment that's changed in terms of we definitely had a much easier time. But if you build what clinicians want and really give them that support, you end up with longevity with clients. And so you're not in this constant hustle to have to get more clients because you build a strong base, right? And same thing, like our clinicians needed to have a 75% show rate. We taught and trained them how to make sure they did that. It's heavy training because it's very realistic to have a 75% show rate, but not everybody understands that. And it
That's
really just comes to the
realistic?
clinical boundaries.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously the holidays and things, but we looked at it on average over 3 months at a time. And it was kind of crazy the things people were doing that they're just not thinking about it, right? Like we had a person who had a Friday shift and she would take Fridays off. So she never could hit her numbers, and the numbers were tied to raises and promotions. And I finally realized, well, it's because you're taking off one Friday a month. So you're never going to get, now another Friday, a client sick or whatever. And I'm like, the whole point of this is stability and, predictability. So you've got to be able to give that to clients to get that back, right? If you can't be consistent and show up, and that's what you're asking them to do so they can do the clinical work,
Mm.
it all comes together, right? It's not
Yeah.
just
No, it does.
business or sales. It's really, I think it was marrying strong clinical practice so that people could see the logic in it. And it's not just, well, you just want to make money or whatever. It's like, but hold on, you said you wanted to come to therapy. You want to work on these goals. But if you're canceling 2 times out of 4, are we doing what we wanted to do? And if it's
Right.
clinically appropriate, sure. If you've already done some work and you don't need to come every week, totally cool.
That makes
But
sense.
it's not always the reason. There's resistance in our field, right? There's all kinds of things that get in the way of the work. And if you can look at it that way, there's a depth to it that feeds stability in the business.
Yeah, that's right. Have you found that the quality of clinician out of grad school has changed over the years? I mean, 2009 to 2026 is very different. And just for everybody who doesn't know,
Yeah.
Danielle grew Therapy Austin from 3 part-time clinicians to 150 clinicians, all
It was like
cash pay,
145,
right?
yeah. But
100.
yeah, all cash
All
pay.
right. We'll
Yeah.
round up there, Danielle.
Round
But
up. Right. Yeah.
yeah, it was all cash pay. So that sounds like a miracle, which is why, I did
Yeah.
want to get to, could you
Sure.
do it again, right? Or is it totally impossible? But have you noticed that clinician quality or culture, the cultural DNA of the clinicians is changing now?
I don't know. I mean, I think everybody always complains about the young people, right? So I think, I don't know. I mean, I have mixed feelings about it, right? I mean, today it's hard to find clinicians who'll see more than 15 clients a week. I get it. I
Okay.
mean, not everybody's can do it, right? Honestly, regardless of time, right? There are clinicians who can do it and there's ones that can't, and that's how it is. But you can build your clinical arm and your muscle, but for a lot of people that they just can't. So I think that, yeah, I mean, expectations in today's marketplace. I mean, like I said, when we were hiring back then, people were like, "You're going to pay me?" Wow, that's great. There was to do the kind of work we were doing. There weren't a lot of paid opportunities to do that. So, or you had to start your own business, which when I started, it took 2 years on average to build a private practice.
Oh
So
my
when you think
gosh.
about that was norm. People were starting and everybody would agree it's going to take a couple of years. You need a part-time job. You're going to have to put a lot of money and time into this. 40 grand on a credit card, Jeremy, so I could do this, right? I believed in myself. I had to, it took time. The internet, all of the stuff, like we were one of the first, like doing that matching stuff with clients online. As apps developed, all of this, the environment changed a lot, right? And so, but this instant, like in the pandemic, if you had a laptop and a license, you had a practice. That's changing. And so people are having to work harder again. But when you look back, just like any business cycle, you're like, well, it took 2 years back then. And that was expected. Now people are like, I'm not full in 3 months. What's wrong? And I think some of it is just each iteration. So it's not so much that it's this generation or, it's just what they were led to believe would happen. And as this shifted in the environment has happened, and now there are a lot of jobs for therapists, but they're not good jobs. And they're not,
Yeah, talk more about that. Yeah.
I don't know anyone who loves, like, and maybe there are people out there, but Talkspace, BetterHelp, all of that, you're asked to do a lot and you don't get the depth, you don't get the support. It's numbers, right? You're not getting the holding and the community and the support that you get in smaller group practices and the depth of training you're getting in smaller group practices. So in some ways you're kind of stuck. You can pay on your own, just like I did. I went out and paid for a lot of training and supervision so that I could do what I wanted to do and felt competent and had the qualifications. But it takes time, it takes money. If you're going to do all that on your own, like paying for DBT training, it was a year-long process and travel and lots of homework. And I didn't get paid for any of that. I joined a team and none of us got paid for that. We did it. So there is a shift, I would say, in people, one, feeling like they came out of grad school and they already know how to do it, and also feeling like if I'm not getting paid, I'm not doing it. And I think it's a reflection of the industry as a whole and how, the types of jobs, and I get that, but this is a field where you have to invest. It's a seasoning. It takes 5 years to season as a clinician. There's a lot of learning and growth in it. You have to, it's a craft too, and
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to do it at that level, not everybody, there's all types of therapy. You can do solution focused, CBT, all of that, and that's viable and clinically evident model. It's just not what I do. It's not going to cure an eating disorder.
Well, you could almost make the argument, not trying to disagree with you in any respect. You could make the argument that you did get paid for the DBT training, right? One of my favorite longtime clients of ours has said, if you want to get paid more as a clinician, be a better clinician. Now
That's it.
that could
That's
be a
it.
controversial sentence to a lot of people,
No,
but
I think that's it. The more you invest in yourself, you are the vessel, you are the tool, and the more you invest in yourself, because a lot of this, you end up doing your own work in a lot of it. I did a lot of group work, all types of. I've done all types of training. I was a training junkie, and I love it. And I learned something about it. I learned about myself. I learned about my clients, and I was able to offer more, which led to higher fees and more longevity and better referrals. Yeah, so I mean, I think that is the truth, but not everybody, I'm a student loan kid. It is one of the obstacles to entry in the field, especially at the time, was if you didn't have a partner, if you weren't in a financial position, you couldn't afford to do that. And so that was where the credit card came in. It was like, well, I'm going to take a risk because this is what I'm meant to do.
hmm.
But not everybody can take that risk, and it's really hard to get out of the types of jobs that don't allow for that, and to get that training to, there's more opportunities today, but still it's time, it's energy, it's a long haul. I look at this as sustainable and long term, and that stuff pays off, but it does require energy and work. And there were, I mean, at Therapy Austin, despite all that training we offered for free, there were people who wouldn't show up, who would never show up and never get trained. I'm like, well, it's kind of on you. But,
Yeah.
you know,
No, that's exactly right. One of the things that I saw a reel recently where Reese Witherspoon was giving career advice, and she said something pretty insightful. It was chase your talents, not your dreams, right? So if you're good at something,
right,
you should run after that, not after the
right,
car, the pool, or the house, or whatever.
right. It's that internal thing, that drive, right? I wanted to teach and train people. I wanted to have good referrals. I wanted a great place for clinicians to work. And so even when it was hard and messy and all the things, it wasn't easy or smooth sailing, it was a lot of work. But I would come back to the driver and the meaning for me. And I think that's where I'm like coming back to this. Could you do it again today? I'm like, I think cash pay is still viable in certain markets. It's harder. It's not, but we also started with this, we always had a sliding scale. We started that way back in the day at $45 an hour was the lowest fee. We had
Wow.
I know that one dropped fast, but we had a pick your fee model where I don't know where it is today, but by the end it was like, on the low end was 110 and the high end was probably 225. And customers, clients would look at that and say what they could afford. Obviously you're going to get a more seasoned clinician for the higher end who's got specialization. And if that's what you need, I mean, you have to pay for that. But it allowed people too to kind of, in a sense, a little bit of a Robin Hood where, for every high fee client, he was covering more of the low fee clients. I kept a balance. Like I had a dashboard where I could see the overall agency fee and clinicians agency average fees, and helping those clinicians to learn how to increase their fees as they seasoned
Hmm.
and do fee raising with clients as appropriate, right? And calibrate that, and as their average fee raised, their pay raised, just like in a private practice. It's again, as you deepen your skill, you can charge more for your time.
Was
And
that
as
part
you
of a matching process that you did, or was that the sliding
Yeah,
for everybody, regardless
it
of?
was anybody. We didn't do any income verification.
Oh
No
wow.
sliding. It wasn't sliding scale. It was on the request form, and you picked your fee. And I guess basic psychology is people pick the highest or the lowest most of the time.
Oh
And
really? Wow.
yeah, and so you kind of, and the clinician would be given an allocation of fees, like this many spots at each fee level. And at the beginning, it was a lot of low fees, and they would begin to increase their fees over time as they felt more confident in their clinical skills, as their caseload filled, all of that stuff, so that, the lower fee spots were always in more demand. So we just kept a ratio so that we didn't ever list too far as an agency as a whole. But for people who struggled with fees and all of that, there was, the bigger we got, the more play there was for that kind of stuff, as people might need more time or more seasoning or more training.
Wow, that's kind of amazing. So you just said this, you're a training junkie. It seems like that's one of your talents. At what point in the development of Therapy Austin, did you look at this thing and you're like, oh, I'm like a leader now, right? Or
I know,
this is a
right? It's
real
kind of
thing.
weird. Right. I struggle with that a lot, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm so passionate, excited about it. And, it's hard sometimes to remember where people are at in their process. And yeah, but I definitely had
Mm.
some lumps on the head where I realized like, oh, I got to step up and be a leader, and I can't just be nice to everybody all the time. And as we grew, right, having to set in systems and processes so that there weren't so many one-off individual decisions, like creating, rubrics and frameworks that so it was fair to everybody and everybody was held to the same standards. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think about on scale. Like I feel like by the time we were at probably 25 is when it's like, okay, it's not just our personal relationships with people anymore. You can't be as involved. And as we started layering in, you know mentors, supervisors, managers, whatever, and realizing like I still, even at the end, was involved in interviewing and connecting with everyone because I always wanted to get the hive. I'm a big believer in group and the hive mind and getting a
Mhm.
sense of what's going on. But you can't at that scale, right? You can't. There were plenty of people there who I'd be like, "Who are you?" We were hiring at times like 5 people at a time. We had cohorts that would come in together and go through
Oh,
training
wow.
together. And so, yeah, as you get more removed from it, but then we built a leadership team of people. It was all clinicians who, they would scale their caseload back and they would
Mm.
take over whatever role or function for each of us. For my co-founder and I, we would teach and train them, and then they would transmit it so that we really had a like Therapy Austin way and a culture, and we really wanted that to stay strong and clear throughout, so that we knew that the clinical service provision was good. It protected the brand. It allowed for a lot of word of mouth growth that people could expect consistency. And so even a
Yeah.
newer clinician was surrounded by lots of support, and those clients wouldn't get lost in the shuffle. Or
Incredible. And so you just picked your best clinicians to be on your leadership team?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes
And some
makes
people had certain talents, right? Or abilities. But yeah, are people who wanted, and not everybody, a lot of people want to do something like that for a few years and start their own practice. But there were a lot of people who were like, no, I want a career. I'd like to work here. And we had
Wow.
people for 7 or 8 years was like the longest, I think, but yeah, who stayed and grew themselves as they became leaders and mentors and teachers and trainers. And others went out and started their own practices or groups, and they would send supervisees to us later. There's a whole ecosystem here around it, which it still feels really good. Yeah.
That's so exciting. I mean, and you talk about hiring cohorts of therapists. I feel like I hear this a lot, that hiring is really tough. And so you talk about profitable supervision programs are now becoming in vogue, right? I mean,
Right.
you'd be writing a whole other wave now of
Right.
clinicians trying to do what you did. So
Right.
how did you hire then? Like, right? Because there must have been this unending pipeline of people coming into Therapy Austin,
Right.
but then you have
And there
to say
was
no
people
to,
where, clinicians are churning out as they either
sure.
it's not a fit, or they can't rise to the occasion, or they're ready to start a private practice, or they realize they want to go work at a hospital or whatever it is, right? I mean,
Oh, wow.
clinicians always don't always know what they want either, right? They're coming out of
Mm.
school. They have a fantasy about what it'll be like. It doesn't always match up, right? Or, all the things, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think we developed a lot of, I mean, the same, we developed an in-depth hiring process, learning by doing, right? We were like, well, that didn't work. What are we going to do now? And so towards the end, we had like you would sign into a online um, platform basically and read through. We had an FAQ that went pretty into depth about common things that would come up, that like, hey, look, you're not going to make a lot of money at the beginning. It's 10 sessions a week. It takes a while to get to full and stay full. Can you survive on X amount of money as you get through this? Can you,
Great
all of
question.
that stuff. Can you work with the hours we're offering? All the same over and over, right? As you go through the pitfalls, you learn. So we had in-depth and then we had people, fill out their answers to questions, clinical questions and other things. And then we eventually moved to like a pre-screen interview and then to the full interview. But up until the end, we would sit down with an interview. We always had 2 or 3 people in the room. For a while, it was myself and the co-founder. And then we ended up having a couple of really talented clinicians who were doing recruiting for a while. We developed a kind of a rubric so each person interviewing could look at and score and then compare. And then, if we needed to go back and do a second interview, if there was dissent, and, and there's personalities, right? We all have our kind of like flavor. And so there might be two or three people on the interview team and one person doesn't like them, but the other two do. And so, and just trying to get at all of that. What are they bringing to the community? We would ask them, like, we know what we have to offer you. What are you going to bring? What is your, what are you bringing into our community? How are you going to contribute and be part of this, right?
For sure. Did you do any assessments?
Towards the end we did with, I think towards the very end we had Indeed, and it was really more for administrative positions. We got burned a couple of times on that, to have people do some of their assessments, just like, they say they're a great communicator and they're like, oh, you're not really. Sometimes things are hard to kind of show up, but a lot of it was more like we had like a practice. I think at one point our clinical director was doing like a practice clinical scenario, especially if we weren't sure on the clinical skill front where they were. Because the way I look at this and what I learned over time is, like, somebody teaching clinical skills is very doable, especially in a system like ours. It's the attitude. Do you want to show up? Are you going to show up? Are you interested? Are you hungry? Or do you get that you're part of a community and you play a vital part here, and this is a two-way street? Are you relationally oriented? Are you curious? Do you think you know everything already? All of that is really important, right? It's like their emotional maturity and alignment with the values of the culture. If we had that, I can teach and train you all kinds of clinical stuff, and I had the resources to do that. But somebody who's not interested or didn't show up,
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Right. Exactly. So, I mean, obviously it's great when you can get both, but I would take, the person over the clinical strength. And people, I also learned to see, I think I'm good at seeing the hidden gems. There are people who don't even realize fully what they have, and you cultivate it in them. It's just like with clients where you're like, it's so rewarding to watch a clinician grow into themselves and really get clear. And that's a beautiful process. And I think everybody at our agency enjoyed that. The mentors, everybody, we enjoyed watching clinicians grow and following. In a sense, it is a craft where you're like apprenticeship, where you're handing down your craft, and that's rewarding. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And it sounds like you didn't have any, I don't know, salty feelings about people starting their own practice, right? I mean,
I did at the beginning. I did, right? I mean, that's
really?
also a learning curve. Oh yeah, where you're like, I gave all this to you, and you just took off. And of course, people were just like, see ya, after you, poured your heart and soul into them. But that's also a learning curve for group practice owners, just like with clients, that you don't, if you're over functioning or you're realizing that you're holding them to something, it's not really proper. But of course it's exhausting. And we came to realize, like, again, all of this was through trial and error, and feeling that bitterness and resentment and going, okay, well, that's on me. Where did I not set up expectations? How do I reframe this? Right. And so we ended up with a process that allowed for very transparent exit. What really burned me was when somebody didn't say they were leaving and I was still sending them new clients, or I just, and that doesn't fair to that client. If that client's, investing in therapy and been there 2 months and their clinician's leaving, and we had a non-compete. So we ended up moving to an amendment to our non-compete at a year. Once you'd kind of that's when the heaviest of our investment in our staff was in the first year. And so once people were at a year and kind of like moving into the next phase, they could sign an amendment to their non-compete. If they stayed, I think it was a total of 3 years, we allowed them, and they gave us 6 months notice. We helped them exit gracefully and take the caseload they wanted with them, knowing that if a client has been with someone that long, they're not going to want to just transfer to some new person. It's not like a dentist or a vet. And so it made sense to allow for that transition to happen, but we could do that in a slow and thoughtful way. And there were honestly at times there were clients the clinicians didn't want to take, and we would help those, maybe the lower fee or people they didn't want to continue working with, and we helped them exit gracefully and in a thoughtful way. I watched a lot of clinicians, we asked for 6 weeks notice. A lot of people did, but people were scared. We're acclimated in our culture like that if we resign, they're going to frog march us out with our belongings, and lock us out of the building. And it doesn't work that way in clinical, right?
No,
you need to provide a slow and thoughtful exit for those clients and help them figure out where they're going or what they're doing. And you can't just do that unless there's an egregious situation and it's more of a firing situation. You just don't do that with clients. So,
right.
We tried to really bake that into our process so the clients had time to process, find another clinician if needed, or make the transition. And again, it was getting that transparency so we could say, hey, we want you to succeed. And a lot of those people would go on and send us clients. They didn't, lower fees or send us clinicians as they became supervisors. Yeah, it's hard. There definitely in the early days, it was harder because one or two people leaving could list the whole business, right? But over time, at volume, you don't have as much of that. Those don't provide as big of a financial dent because one of the challenges is that you're trying to get stability in your budget. So, when can I get another property, or when can I add
For
this
sure.
service or this training? And you build your budget and then you see what happens, right? In this field is,
Shifty. It's real shifty, huh?
yeah, and it doesn't look like this, right? And so trying to, you don't just build your clients and they stay forever, right? You're constantly trying to, and things happen. People lose their jobs, economic things happen.
Or
COVID
COVID
happens.
happens and Austin explodes, right? Famous podcasters move there, and all of a
Right.
sudden there's this new, resurgence.
Yeah, and so everybody was full and the show rate was 90% because everybody's trapped at home. But right after COVID, selling skyrocketed because all these people came here, bought up houses, Californians came, right, whatever, but nothing against Californians, but our cost of living exploded, and suddenly our clinicians couldn't afford to live here, right, or couldn't. And so now you're trying to raise your fees, and it's always something, right? You're always, and now we had all these spaces, but they're sitting empty for years, and we're in long-term leases.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I'm sure the building must have been pretty big, right? For 150 people, or was that pretty spread
We
out?
had 5 locations in Austin
Okay,
by the end, right?
gotcha.
They're in different parts of the city. So there's a thing here about crossing the river. It's tough. There's only like 2 major highways across, and traffic's bad.
Oh,
And so
wow.
we put places in South Austin, so people weren't having to drive. And of course, with COVID, a lot of that shifted as well. But there's still, post COVID, there's been a resurgence in demand for in person, right? And so it's, people tend
Yeah,
to
I
want
mean,
hybrid and the best of both worlds now. But yeah,
yeah, Medicare changed their requirements now. So if you see Medicare clients, you have to see them in office once every 6 months, right? So now there's an
right,
in-person component that's
right.
slowly coming back in. So you
Right.
kept
And
it
of course, we
cash.
were cash pay, so we weren't
Yeah,
required to, but of course,
that's right.
it is nice to have the best of both worlds, right? It's nice to be able to sit in a room with somebody and have that nervous system interaction. And especially, you get a lot of more clues, but also it's kind of cool when you see people's backgrounds and what's going on at home. But
Yeah, that's
yeah, I
data
think,
too, right? I mean, it all factors into what's going on.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's fantastic. This episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR built to support you in the day-to-day work of running your practice. If you're a health or wellness practitioner, you already know the care you provide starts well before your client arrives and extends far beyond the treatment room. Jane is there to support you in every part of that experience. With online booking, your clients can book at a time that works for them. And with features like notifications, they'll even be able to grab last minute openings when they pop up. It's an easy way to keep your schedule full while getting your clients the care they need. During your appointment, Jane's AI powered documentation feature can help you thoughtfully take notes so you can stay present with the person in front of you. And after appointments, you can end your time together on a healing note, not a transactional one, by charging the card on file. To learn more about how Jane can support you and your clients, head to jane.app/demo. And one last thing, if you're ready to get started with Jane, you can use my code in the show notes for a 1-month grace period on your new account. Yeah, and your story arc, you start this thing, it grows, it balloons into this giant practice, you're running it, and then you sold it, which I
Hmm.
feel like is I don't know, you're in like an epilogue stage now, you're beginning a new
Hmm.
chapter. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of flippers now, or there's a lot of acquisition activity in the market.
Hmm.
Did you
Hmm.
sell around the time where that was ramping up or just getting started? And then,
I sold right before it started crashing, right? So during the pandemic, I was getting an email every day. So when I started all this, Jeremy, I never thought I would sell. That wasn't even a
yeah,
concept to sell a therapy business. No, you
right.
retire, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's not
Right.
like a dental practice. You don't sell it. People don't just go to the next person, right? Your whole history is with you. It doesn't just
Yeah.
translate that way. Even psychiatry is different, right? So it was never in my mind that I was going to sell a practice, right? And then as we grew, I started realizing like, this is bigger than me now. I don't know what's going to happen. We started exploring, well, could the employees take over? But it just never quite felt like that was going to work. And again, as we grew, it was too expensive, all of the stuff. But then the pandemic hit, and suddenly every day I've got this email from a cosmetic surgeon, these people who are like, we want to buy your practice. What is happening? Eventually I started answering a few. I'm like, what's going on? I've never had seen anything like it. So there's, all of a sudden everyone was interested in therapy and saw it as an industry in a way that hadn't been viewed before. Mostly mom and pops, there were a few chains or things starting up, but not much. I mean, even like some of the big ones now, we're still just getting started. I started seeing my first ads for therapy on TV, that Michael Phelps ad. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
what the hell is
Yeah.
this? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it was all new. So we started talking or whatever. And at first we weren't really interested. It just none of it felt values aligned. But I think the pandemic took a toll on us as owners and age, right? I mean, my kids were launching. I was kind of ready to do something else. I was tired. 10 years is a long time, right? And I saw the shifting sands and I was like, I don't have it in me to do another iteration. Like, the reinventing ourselves over and over, going through the pandemic, all of that. I was like, I don't have it in me. It's going to be huge. It's going to take a long time to get to the new norm. And I felt like it was a younger person's, I needed that. I'm in my 50s. It was like, it needs to be someone in their 30s or 40s to do this. So, and I felt like it was going to cost a lot of money because I had a sense that we were going to shrink and things were going to change. So we started looking. We spent about a year looking for buyers and talked to a dozen potential and just nothing felt values aligned. Nothing felt like it matched. And we gave up and we're like, okay, well, maybe what are we going to do? How are we going to take our next step? And then we got introduced word of mouth to the folks that we ended up selling to. Another practice here in town that we were friends with had met them and were selling to them. And it felt more values aligned and more like what we were looking for. And we'd learned a lot going through that process. So but it was like end of 22, November 22. I think we got out right in the nick of time because it all started slowing down. I think for all the different reasons, right? But some of it is that people had just went around and bought up whatever they could, and then they realized it's not so simple, and it's not a playbook industry. It's more complex.
Oh, it's all relationally driven, and I think therapists are not engineers.
Right.
I mean, it's a very different
And
profile.
People have lost a lot of money learning about that.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
that's right.
it's good. We got out at a good time, stayed on through transition or whatever. And then the last year I was in more of a networking, partnerships kind of role.
Love it.
Yeah.
Because it's not just like a one and done deal. I think that's what a lot of people miss about this conversation. And they miss this in the social media content. Like, you sell a business and you are still there
I
for
worked
a while.
more in those 3 years than, really, it was so intense. And because you're introducing change, and change, it takes a lot to help people through it. And, all the conversations, all the stuff, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. It wasn't just sign the check and you're out, right? I mean, it just isn't like that. And I think, and you have to be clear about what you want and what you're willing to do. Like, I was prepared to be an employee. It was a hard mental shift. It's not my company anymore. I work here now, but it's not my company anymore. And that I didn't maintain any equity or anything like that. And that's a huge shift to, transition into and figure out, okay, how do I navigate all of that? And
it is I can imagine it's a huge shift. So do you have any advice for practices that are considering that as they move forward?
I think so much of this, Jeremy, right, comes down to size, right? Like, and the identity of the practice. I think what I see a lot of is people who want to sell, but either too small and to be bought by the larger players, or want to sell and exit. And that's how it kind of gone in waves. When we've sold, nobody wanted to buy the practice if the owners didn't stay. And then there was this long period of time where everyone was like, get rid of the owners. We don't want to buy your practice unless you leave. Right. And now I don't know. It seems to be like kind of a mix, but I think there is, to me, it's a values and identity decision in addition to a financial decision. And there's this fantasy about what it'll be. And you have to be prepared for both of those shifts and to let go, make the decision. Are you staying? Are you not staying? What do you want out of this? I think a lot of group practice owners are shocked by the low valuation of the business, because if all the employees walk, you don't have a business. And so it's not these huge multiples because depending on, again, the intimacy of the practice and how attached they are to the owner, where the referrals are coming from, how stable all that is, right? It's not as straightforward as a lot of people think. And I've watched a lot of people go kind of look around and realize like either they have to scale and get a little bigger, or they just have to find a different way. I think there are a lot of other opportunities out there, kind of like, Dan King and other groups that are doing that aren't the traditional playbook of equity, that are viable alternatives. And then early on, often one clinician will buy another practice, right? I mean, here in town, I've seen several group practices change hands between clinicians, where someone wants to do it and they're able to come in and they're a clinician also, and they're able to lead from that place. And I've seen that work successfully too. So I think there's different ways when you think about selling, but if you're under 2 million, it can be difficult to really be viable for the type of sale that I think we hear about a lot. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah, without a doubt. It's really tricky. And I think you keep saying this term values aligned. I think that's really important, because you're basically marrying this buyer, right? In your case, 3 years, which I feel like is kind of long, no?
It is a long time, Jeremy.
Okay.
I was like, I would not recommend. I'd say 2 max, because you need a year to get through the initial, just all of it. And then, and then some time to kind of like fade out, but still be there and all of that to provide support and jump in where you're needed. But I think 3 years was a long time. Yeah, it really was. But I understand too. I mean, they wanted stability and,
Yeah, you got to tell the team and the clients, and there's a huge amount of stuff in the background that happens, right? And even before you get there, there's due diligence and letters of intent.
And even just all of that. Yeah, like moving the money around and changing all the accounts, the logistics of it. Again, depending on how big you are, it's
exhausting.
It was a lot, right? Yeah.
And then sometimes, and I think this is important for people to hear too, sometimes you go through all of that and it falls through, right? So you could put in the 60 hours a week it's going to take you to do all that, and then something at the last minute falls apart, and then you're done.
Or the best laid plans don't work out. One of the things that I've enjoyed working with Dan, because he's really trying to build a values aligned
he's first rate
group
for sure.
And I think he does a lot of due diligence and a lot of like relationship work, right, to be clear about what do you want, what do we want. And it takes a lot of time, and not all those deals are going to go through because of it. But again, if you're trying to build something sustainable and not just hustle to close the deal, right? You really want to get to know, what are you hoping for in this? Can we craft something that works for both of us? It's a stance and a way of working that I think most of what we met when we were selling and had a broker and all that was like, there was a sales guy and the dude with the spreadsheet, and it was all guys in a field full of women. And and I was like, I get it. And I know those numbers are important, but do you get what makes this work? And if you don't get that, it's going to fail. And you're not going to convince any clinician based on your metrics, I think are important, but also, again, the marrying of the metrics to the clinical practice and the success of the clinician in being able, we go into this field because we want to help people, right? And if you are helping them to help more people and helping them do it well, they feel good about it, right? They want to work. They want to do their job well. They want to see those transformations. We hold a lot of crap. If you're doing that, the metrics are really a way, it's just a way to reflect and look for ways to help them develop their craft and do their job, versus a punitive, grading system that's about whatever. Most clinicians are not motivated by money. Of course, we all want to make a good living, but that's not why we got into this field. We were told from day one in grad school, you're going to be poor the rest of your life. This is not an MBA. Right. So if you can connect to the meaning behind it all, the business is important and the stability and all of that. But really, where's the meaning in all of this? And that's the heart of it. And I think,
that's amazing.
That's where I think the group practice model will thrive in the sea of all of this. It's hard to get clients for people to know, but ultimately we're humans and we want to feel connection and meaning and cared for. And that shines through when you're in small group practice settings, I think.
I love it. Well, as a parting question, but what is your one piece of advice now that you're doing a lot of coaching, one lesson that you want practice owners to take away while they're in growth mode?
Patience. I think there's a lot of pressure right now to do more marketing, sign up for this thing, this, you have to be an influencer, you have to do all this stuff. And I'm like, come back to, right, we know when we meet with our clients and someone comes in and is like, I'm ready to get over this trauma now. You're like, and they've got a whole childhood history and they're like, I'm ready to beat this thing. I'm like, great, but I'm here to help you. But it's not, it's like anything else, right? I mean, substance abuse, relapse, all it's part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And helping people through the process and see that they're making progress. But it's not just I signed up for this and I went to therapy and now, my lifetime of stuff is resolved. There's an impatience around it. And of course, we're suffering. But this is a process. And if you can come back to the clinical frame in your mind of like, this is a process, it's a journey. We learn along the way, we make shifts, and we can't wrap our head around that much rapid change and do it well quickly anyway. It's not the way we're wired as people. So if you can kind of come back to that and like, what's the purpose of this practice? What's the purpose of this group? What's what is my value? What makes it all worthwhile? And to have patience. And that is the goal, really, to be the shiniest thing. It's not typically what most therapists are all about, right? It's about quality and sustainability and transformation, right? So if you can come back to that and get out of the FOMO mindset and just hone in
Get
on
off
what you do
social
well.
media, for sure.
I mean, it's a big
Yeah.
reflection of our culture, right? And therapists are just as vulnerable to it as other folks. And it's like, just hone in on what you love, and do that well. And those practices grow and over time, but yeah.
Yeah, I love it. How do people get more Danielle in their lives?
Well, group practice owners, I have a free once a month group practice owners networking meeting I do, and it's people from across the country and all different kinds of models, and we just get together and talk about how we're solving problems and share resources with each other and that stuff. And happy to have, I tend to have people meet with me first just to make sure it's a fit and they're not trying to sell something and all that stuff, because it is a fairly intimate community. But happy to meet with folks about that. And then I have coaching. I do coaching. I still see clients, right? I don't even have a website right now, Jeremy. I just haven't done it.
Amazing.
But I still have clients. I still see about 10 clients a week, and I do some coaching with group practice owners and some solo practitioners, and they can reach out to me at danielle@hayestherapy.net.
There you go.
And that's it,
Amazing.
right? I mean,
I love it.
happy to chat with folks or point them in the right direction. And
Wow.
yeah.
Well, thank you for your time and being so generous with us today. And
Oh,
yeah,
I'm so glad.
I'll see you
I'll pick
for
your
sure.
brain some more when we meet up at the conference, because your name has come to mind for me a few times, Jeremy.
Oh,
And
cool.
I think I don't have enough clarity about what you're doing, but I think I'm looking for someone like you. And I'd love you and I to spend a little more time together. You were on my list after the conference, and I just didn't work my way through that whole list.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I'm seeing a lot of billing stuff with some of these smaller groups that are in, and I want to understand better like what you do and how you do it, because I think they're still getting that, even like in my business, right? Having that panel of strong, like a really good banker who was very invested in us, a really good accountant, right? It took time, a great commercial realtor, right? As I built those relationships, a builder, right? When we had to remodel, all of that, of really strong, solid people. And I think in this field, that's going to be what we really, finding those people who are really in it and are going to
Yeah.
have the expertise. Yeah. I think that's part of where I see the emerging. Like ideally we would end up with some kind of nonprofit representing us that's not just by practice, by field. Our disciplines are so broken up with our boards, and the
So
boards
true.
really aren't about this. And I think as group practice owners, we've got to have something at some point. But for right now, really, it's that strong referral network of like, hey, you can go to this guy and he's going to be straight up with you. And
I love it.
that,
We
so
should definitely talk more for sure. Yeah,
let's
and
talk more. Yeah.
I'll send you an email. We'll set that up. But
Yeah. Because the
yeah,
biller issue is there's certain practices I'm aware of that are kind of, that's where they're struggling. And then
it's
figuring
tough.
out how, yeah, I mean, just anyway, I think you and Maya have talked too, but I think some of this, like with the CRMs, the challenge is getting the data into the CRMs,
It's
right?
constant. And I think Brexy does one of the better jobs, if not the best job, of information collecting, because it's
Hmm.
the color dye you pour there is what you get at
Yes,
payment or
that's the
not.
thing, right? And it's the same with the metrics. Like these group practice owners need dashboards to be able to make informed decisions. And
For
Brexy
sure.
is positioned to do that really well. It's the getting all the data in from the EHR, from,
Totally.
and having a single source of truth. And she's working on all of that. But yeah, it is, that's the challenge, is that not everything all these platforms don't talk to each other.
No way. It's crazy. It's a nuts.
In
All right,
HIPAA,
well,
it makes sense with HIPAA and everything else, but everything's,
totally.
yeah. So you're like, oh yeah.
It's so disjointed. Well, I'll send you an email after this and we'll get
let's
together.
do
But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, Danielle. If you enjoyed today's episode of The Claim Game, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps new listeners to find us. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to The Claim Game on your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means so much to us. We want to provide valuable education about revenue cycle management. So if there's something we didn't cover in our topic that was a burning question for you, please let us know so we can try to get you the information you desire. You can find the links to all resources we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. And if you want to dive deeper into our resources, we have 2 places you can do that. First, you can go to our blog at practicesol.com/blog, where we have 8 years of educational blogs. If you want to learn more about what Practice Solutions does, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Just go to practicesol.com to learn more and to connect with one of our awesome people on our team. Thanks for listening. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and this is The Claim Game. See you at the game table next time.